Have you ever been treated like you were absolutely nothing? Like your presence didn't matter, like every word you spoke was a waste of oxygen in the room? Have you ever felt the burning sting of humiliation so deep that it carved itself into your soul and refused to let go? Well, let me tell you something that will shake you to your core. Something that happened to me and changed my entire perspective on success, revenge, and the beautiful irony of life. I'm standing here today, ready to share the most incredible, emotional, and downright unbelievable journey of my life. And trust me when I say this, you won't want to miss a single second of what I'm about to reveal. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is the story I'm about to unfold. A story of being crushed, humiliated, and treated like the dirt under someone's shoe, only to rise up in the most spectacular way imaginable. This isn't just about business, it's about dignity. It's about self-worth. It's about that burning desire deep in your chest that refuses to be extinguished, no matter how many times people try to stomp it out. Picture this moment with me. Really let it sink into your mind. Feel it in your bones. I'm sitting in a cold, sterile conference room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps, casting this harsh, unforgiving glow on everything and everyone. The walls are a lifeless gray, the kind that sucks the energy right out of your body, and there's this massive mahogany table stretching out before me, like some kind of altar to corporate arrogance. Around this table sit 15 executives, all dressed in their expensive suits, their designer watches catching the light, their perfectly styled hair and their practiced smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. And then there's me, sitting at the far end, the absolute furthest point from the head of the table, in a chair that feels smaller than everyone else's, wearing a suit I bought off the rack 3 years ago that's starting to show wear at the elbows. I can feel their eyes on me, not looking at me, but through me, past me, as if I'm transparent, as if I'm a ghost that somehow wandered into their important meeting. The lead executive, a man named Richard Thornton with silver hair slicked back so perfectly it looks painted on, is presenting the quarterly results with this booming voice full of self-satisfaction and pride. He's talking about growth percentages, market domination, shareholder value, all these big impressive numbers that make everyone around the table nod appreciatively and murmur their approval. And then, then he does it. He pauses mid-presentation, his laser pointer still aimed at the projection screen, and he turns to look directly at me with these cold, calculating eyes that hold nothing but contempt. And of course, he says, his voice dripping with condescension, we have our little friend here from the satellite office, the one who's been struggling to meet even the most basic targets. The room erupts in polite laughter, that awful, cruel kind of laughter that people use when they want to join in on humiliating someone but don't want to seem too obvious about it. My face burns hot. I can feel the blood rushing to my cheeks. My hands clench into fists under the table where nobody can see. My fingernails digging into my palm so hard I'm sure I'll leave marks. But I don't say anything, not yet, because this moment, this exact moment of crushing humiliation, is something I've been preparing for in ways they could never imagine. You see, what nobody in that room knows, what not a single one of those smug, self-satisfied executives has even the slightest clue about, is that I've been playing a completely different game than they thought. While they saw me as the failure from the satellite office, the person who barely mattered enough to invite to these meetings, I was building something extraordinary in the shadows, something so powerful and so carefully hidden that its revelation would shake the very foundations of everything they believed about themselves and their secure little world. Let me take you back, let me really paint this picture for you of how this all began. Because every great story has layers, has depth, has moments that build upon each other until they create something magnificent. 3 years before that horrible meeting, I was genuinely at the bottom, not pretending, not playing a role, but actually struggling to survive in a corporate environment that seemed designed to crush anyone who didn't fit their perfect mold. I had joined this company, let's call them Titan Industries because that's essentially what they were, a massive conglomerate that owned dozens of subsidiary companies across multiple industries. I came in with hope, with dreams, with this naive belief that hard work and dedication would be recognized and rewarded. How foolishly optimistic I was back then. How innocent, how completely unprepared for the reality of corporate politics and the way that certain people decide within seconds of meeting you whether you're worth their time or destined to be ignored forever. They placed me in what they called a satellite office, which is corporate speak, for the place we send people we don't really care about. a small operation in a city 3 hours away from headquarters that handled minor accounts and generated modest revenue. My official title was Regional Development Manager, which sounds impressive until you realize that I was managing a team of 3 people in an office that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1980s, with carpet that had mysterious stains and computers that took 5 minutes to boot up. But here's the thing about being underestimated. Here's the secret that those executives in their glass towers never learned. When people think you're nothing, when they believe you're not worth watching, they stop paying attention to what you're actually doing. And oh, what I was doing. I started studying obsessively, consuming every piece of information I could find about business acquisitions, corporate structures, financial leveraging, market dynamics, everything. I would wake up at 4 in the morning, before anyone else in my apartment building stirred, and I would read articles, watch lectures, take notes until my hand cramped, filling notebook after notebook with strategies and ideas and plans. During my lunch breaks, while my colleagues went out to eat or scrolled through their phones, I was making phone calls, networking with investors, building relationships with people who actually saw potential in me, who listened when I spoke and recognized that I understood things others missed. At night, after everyone else had gone home, after the office lights dimmed and the cleaning crew made their rounds, I stayed, working on my own projects, developing business plans, creating financial models, laying the groundwork for something nobody expected. Have you ever worked on something in complete secrecy? Something so big and so important that you couldn't risk anyone finding out? Comment below and let me know, because that feeling of carrying a massive secret, of knowing something incredible that nobody else knows, it's both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. The disrespect didn't come all at once. It accumulated gradually like drops of water wearing away stone. Each incident small enough that you might dismiss it individually, but together, forming a pattern of systematic devaluation that ate away at my confidence day after day. There was the time I prepared a comprehensive market analysis, spent 2 weeks researching, compiling data, creating presentations, only to have Richard Thornton glance at it for literally 5 seconds before tossing it aside and saying, "This isn't what we need," without offering any explanation of what we actually did need. There was the quarterly meeting where I presented a proposal that could have saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars, laying out every detail, every calculation, every potential benefit, and watching as the executives checked their phones, whispered to each other, barely acknowledged my presence, and then 3 months later implemented almost the exact same plan but credited it to someone from the main office. There were the emails I sent that went unanswered for weeks, the phone calls that were never returned, the suggestions that were dismissed with a wave of the hand, and that patronizing smile that said, "Aren't you cute for trying?" Jennifer Morrison, the chief financial officer, once actually patted me on the head after a meeting, literally patted me like I was a child or a pet, and said, "Maybe someday you'll understand how real business works." I remember standing there frozen, feeling this mix of rage and humiliation and helplessness, wanting to scream, wanting to tell her exactly what I thought, but swallowing it all down because I absolutely knew, that reacting emotionally would only confirm their belief that I didn't belong in their world. The worst part wasn't the big dramatic moments of disrespect. It was the constant grinding everyday dismissiveness, the way my ideas were ignored in meetings, the way people would talk over me as if I hadn't spoken, the way I was consistently left out of important emails and decisions that affected my work, the way I was always the last to know about changes and the first to be blamed when things went wrong. They created this environment where I was simultaneously expected to perform miracles with no resources and criticized for not achieving the impossible, where my successes were attributed to luck or timing, and my failures were held up as evidence of my inadequacy. I watched as people with half my experience and a quarter of my dedication got promotions, got recognition, got invited to the exclusive lunches and golf outings where real decisions were made, while I remained stuck in that forgotten satellite office, invisible to everyone who mattered. But something interesting happens when you're pushed down repeatedly. When you're told again and again that you're not good enough, you either break completely or you forge yourself into something harder, sharper, more determined than you ever imagined possible. I chose the latter. I made a conscious decision that their dismissal of me would become my greatest advantage, that their blindness to my potential would be the very thing that allowed me to build something extraordinary right under their noses. Every insult became fuel. Every dismissal became motivation. Every condescending comment became another brick in the foundation of what I was constructing in secret. I started using my position at the satellite office strategically, you see. Being forgotten meant being unwatched, and being unwatched meant having freedom. I began cultivating relationships with clients they considered too small to matter, companies that were growing rapidly but hadn't hit their radar yet, entrepreneurs who were building the next big thing in industries the executives considered beneath their attention. I listened to these people, really listened, learned about their challenges and their visions, and I started making connections, introducing people to each other, facilitating deals, building a network of loyalty and trust that existed completely outside the official corporate structure. I was creating my own ecosystem, my own economy of relationships and opportunities, and the beautiful irony was that I was doing it while technically employed by the very company that thought I was worthless. The satellite office, that forgotten outpost they'd stuck me in, became my laboratory, my testing ground, my secret base of operations where I could experiment and learn and build without anyone caring enough to check on what I was actually doing. The strategic planning phase of my journey was where everything started to crystallize, where vague dreams and burning resentment transformed into concrete, actionable steps toward something magnificent. I had been studying the corporate structure of Titan Industries obsessively, not just the public information available in annual reports, but the deeper architecture of ownership, the web of holding companies and parent corporations, the complex financial instruments and debt structures that held the whole empire together. I discovered something fascinating that most people don't realize about massive conglomerations. They're often far more fragile than they appear, held together by layers of debt and complex financing arrangements that create vulnerabilities if you know where to look. Titan Industries, for all its apparent strength and market dominance, was actually owned by a holding company called Apex Global Holdings, which in turn had its own complicated ownership structure involving several investment firms and private equity groups. The key insight, the thing that changed everything, was realizing that Apex Global Holdings had been struggling financially for the past 18 months, something they were hiding from the public and even from most of their subsidiary companies. They had overextended themselves with aggressive acquisitions, taken on too much debt at variable interest rates right before rates started climbing, and were now quietly desperate for liquidity, for cash infusions that could stabilize their position before the whole house of cards started to wobble. I discovered this through my network of connections, through a chance conversation with a financial analyst who worked for one of the investment banks that had exposure to Apex's debt, through careful reading of obscure financial filings and piecing together information that nobody else was bothering to connect. And then the idea hit me, crazy and audacious and absolutely terrifying in its scope. What if I could acquire Apex Global Holdings? What if I, the dismissed failure from the satellite office, could actually buy the parent company that owned Titan Industries? The thought was so ridiculous, so seemingly impossible, that at first I laughed at myself, dismissed it as a fantasy born from frustration and wounded pride. But the idea wouldn't leave me alone. It kept circling back, demanding attention, growing from a whisper to a shout in my mind. I started running numbers, building financial models, exploring different acquisition structures, and slowly, incredibly, I began to see that it might actually be possible. I had been building capital through side investments and consulting work, money I'd earned outside my regular job that nobody at Titan Industries knew about, and while it was nowhere near enough to buy Apex outright, it could serve as the foundation for leveraging other people's money, for bringing in investors, for structuring a deal that used Apex's own assets as collateral for the acquisition. I spent months on this, every spare moment consumed by planning and preparation, reaching out to potential investors, presenting my case to private equity firms, showing them the opportunity to acquire an undervalued holding company with solid underlying assets at a moment when the current owners were desperate enough to accept a lower offer. I faced rejection after rejection, doors slammed in my face, meetings that went nowhere, investors who listened politely and then passed, but I kept going, kept refining my pitch, kept searching for the right partners who could see what I saw. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a group of investors from Singapore who specialized in distressed corporate acquisitions, who had the capital and the appetite for risk, and who, crucially, liked the narrative of the underdog taking over the empire that had dismissed him. They saw the poetic justice in it, the marketing value, the story that could be told. And beyond that, they saw that my analysis was solid, that the deal made financial sense, that Apex Global Holdings really was vulnerable and available at the right price. The negotiation process was the most intense, exhausting, exhilarating period of my entire life. Months of conference calls at strange hours to accommodate different time zones, meetings in anonymous hotel conference rooms, where we hammered out terms and conditions, lawyers reviewing endless documents, financial due diligence that felt like it would never end, and through it all, maintaining absolute secrecy because if anyone at Titan Industries or Apex Holdings discovered what I was attempting, they would kill the deal instantly, would throw up barriers and defenses that would make acquisition impossible. I was living a double life, by day playing the role of the struggling regional development manager at the forgotten satellite office, showing up to meetings where I was ignored, submitting reports that nobody read, maintaining the facade of being exactly who they thought I was, and by night transforming into someone completely different, the architect of a massive corporate takeover, negotiating with investors, strategizing with lawyers, reviewing financial statements, making decisions that involved hundreds of millions of dollars. The stress was unbelievable. There were nights I didn't sleep at all, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind racing through scenarios and contingencies, worrying about everything that could go wrong. And trust me, in a deal this complex, there are approximately 1 million things that can go wrong. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when the pressure felt too overwhelming, when the possibility of failure seemed so catastrophic that continuing felt insane. What if the deal fell through? What if I was exposed and fired? What if I was taking on debt I couldn't handle? What if my investors backed out at the last minute? These questions haunted me, but deeper than the fear was something else, something primal and powerful, a burning need to prove everyone wrong, to show them that the person they dismissed, the failure they mocked, was capable of something they couldn't even imagine. The due diligence phase revealed exactly what I had suspected. Apex Global Holdings was in worse shape than their public filings suggested. They had cash flow problems, covenant violations they were desperately trying to hide, pressure from their own lenders that was mounting by the week. This should have scared me, should have made me reconsider, but instead it confirmed that we had leverage, that they needed this deal as much as or more than we did, that they were in a position where they would have to accept terms favorable to us. My team of investors, lawyers, and financial advisors worked around the clock, preparing documentation, structuring the financing, creating the legal entities that would hold the acquisition, setting up the governance structures that would give me operational control while protecting the investors' interests. We negotiated every detail of the purchase agreement, every clause and subclauses, every representation and warranty, fighting over terms that seemed minor but could have major implications down the road. The sellers were tough negotiators despite their desperate position. They tried to maintain some dignity, some appearance of strength, but ultimately, they needed the deal to close, needed the cash infusion that would save them from their creditors, and we knew it, which gave us the upper hand even though we were ostensibly the smaller player. There were several moments when the deal almost collapsed, when disagreements over valuation or terms or timing threatened to derail everything, and each time I had to dig deep, had to find new ways to bridge the gaps, had to convince everyone to stay at the table and keep working toward agreement. Have you ever been in a situation where everything you've worked for hangs by a thread, where one wrong word or one miscalculation could destroy months or years of effort? That's where I lived for half a year, in that constant state of high-wire tension, knowing that at any moment it could all fall apart. The final steps before the revelation were surreal, almost dreamlike in their intensity and significance, everything coming together in a rush of signatures and wire transfers and legal filings that made it all suddenly, shockingly real. We closed the deal on a Friday afternoon. The money transferred, the shares exchanged, the documents filed with the appropriate regulatory agencies, and just like that, legally and officially, I was now the controlling owner of Apex Global Holdings, which meant I owned Titan Industries, which meant I owned the company where I was still technically the dismissed regional development manager of a satellite office. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt, so exquisitely beautiful that I had to laugh even as my hand shook while signing the final documents. My investors were thrilled, already calculating their returns, already planning the restructuring and optimization that would maximize value, but they had agreed to give me operational control for the first year, to let me run things my way, to let this play out according to my vision. I spent that weekend in a hotel room, barely leaving, barely eating, just sitting and processing what had happened, what I had accomplished, what was about to unfold. On Monday morning, I had a choice to make about how to reveal this. I could have done it through official channels, could have sent out a press release, could have had lawyers deliver notifications, but that felt too impersonal, too corporate, too removed from the emotional core of why this mattered. No, I wanted to tell them in person, wanted to see their faces when they realized, wanted to be in that room when their entire reality shifted. So I did something that felt risky but necessary. I scheduled an emergency board meeting at Titan Industries, using my new authority as owner of Apex Global Holdings to call together the exact same executives who had been dismissing and mocking me for years. The message went out through official channels on Sunday evening, a terse notification from Apex Holdings requiring all senior executives of Titan Industries to attend a mandatory meeting Monday at 9 a.m. to discuss organizational changes and strategic direction. And I can only imagine the confusion and concern it must have generated. The weekend it must have ruined for people who were suddenly worried about their positions, their bonuses, their secure little world being disrupted by forces they didn't understand. I didn't sleep that Sunday night, not from anxiety now, but from anticipation, from the electric thrill of knowing what was coming, from mentally rehearsing how I would handle it, what I would say, how I would carry myself. I picked out my best suit, the new one I'd bought after the deal closed. Still not as expensive as theirs, but perfectly tailored, perfectly appropriate, making me look like I belonged in that room not as the dismissed failure, but as someone who commanded respect and attention. The revelation day arrived with bright sunshine that felt almost theatrical in its timing, as if the universe itself was highlighting this moment of transformation and justice. I arrived at Titan Industries headquarters early, walked through the gleaming lobby with its marble floors and modern art, took the elevator to the executive floor that I'd only visited a handful of times in 3 years, each time feeling like an intruder in a space where I didn't belong. But this time was different. This time I walked with purpose and confidence. This time the security guards who usually barely acknowledged me suddenly straightened up and greeted me respectfully because the memo had gone out, because they knew something was different even if they didn't know exactly what. I entered the main conference room, the same sterile space where I'd been humiliated so many times. But now I walked to the head of the table, the position of power, the seat usually reserved for Richard Thornton, and I sat down and waited. One by one they arrived, the executives who had dismissed me, looking confused, looking concerned, whispering to each other in small groups, trying to figure out what was happening, why this emergency meeting had been called, what changes were coming from the parent company. They saw me sitting at the head of the table and the confusion deepened. Some looked annoyed, others looked puzzled. Richard Thornton actually laughed when he walked in and saw me there, said, "I think you're in the wrong seat, friend," with that same condescending tone he'd always used. I smiled at him, didn't move, just smiled and gestured to the empty chairs and said, "Please, everyone have a seat. We have important things to discuss." The room filled up, 15 executives taking their places, Jennifer Morrison looking at her phone, clearly thinking this was beneath her attention, David Chen checking his watch impatiently, Sarah Williams rolling her eyes at her neighbor, all of them embodying that casual arrogance that comes from years of unchallenged power and privilege. When everyone was seated, when the room fell into that expectant silence that precedes important announcements, I stood up slowly, deliberately, letting the moment stretch out, and I began to speak. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I said, my voice steady, clear, carrying across the room with an authority that made several people look up in surprise. "I know you're wondering why you're here, what organizational changes are coming, what this means for your positions and your futures." I paused, looked around the room, made eye contact with each person who had dismissed me, who had mocked me, who had treated me like I was nothing. 3 days ago, I completed the acquisition of Apex Global Holdings, which, as you know, is the parent company that owns Titan Industries. The room went completely still. You could have heard a pin drop. 15 executives frozen in place, their faces showing a progression of emotions, confusion, disbelief, shock, as they tried to process what I just said. "That means," I continued, speaking slowly, clearly, wanting every word to land with full impact, "that I am now, legally and officially, the owner of this company, Your company, the company where I've worked for 3 years as the supposedly failing regional development manager that you've all enjoyed dismissing and mocking. Richard Thornton's face went pale, actually pale, the color draining away as if someone had opened a valve, his mouth opening and closing without sound like a fish pulled from water. Jennifer Morrison dropped her phone, the clatter loud in the silent room, her perfectly composed expression cracking into something raw and vulnerable. David Chen's eyes went wide, his hand gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Sarah Williams actually gasped, a small, choked sound that escaped before she could stop it. The reactions that followed were extraordinary to witness, a mixture of shock, denial, anger, fear, and desperate attempts to salvage the situation that would have been comical if they weren't also so deeply satisfying. Richard Thornton was the first to recover enough to speak, his voice shaking slightly as he said, "This is impossible. This must be some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding." Clinging to denial because accepting reality meant accepting that everything had changed, that his position and power were no longer secure. "There's no mistake, Richard," I said calmly, pulling out a folder from my briefcase, documents that proved everything, share certificates, purchase agreements, corporate filings, all there in black and white, irrefutable and official. I slid copies across the table, watching as they grabbed them with trembling hands, reading frantically, searching for some loophole, some escape, some way this couldn't be true. Jennifer Morrison tried a different approach, forcing her face into a smile that looked more like a grimace, saying, "Well, this is certainly unexpected, but I'm sure we can work together productively. I've always believed in your potential." And the shamelessness of that lie, the transparent attempt to rewrite history, was almost impressive in its audacity. "Have you, Jennifer?" I asked, my voice still calm but with an edge now, with steel underneath the politeness. "Because I distinctly remember you patting me on the head and telling me that maybe someday I'd understand how real business works. Do you remember that?" Her smile faltered, her eyes dropping to the table, unable to meet my gaze. David Chen tried the aggressive route, standing up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly, saying, "You can't just come in here and upend everything. We have contracts, we have rights, we'll fight this." And I almost felt sorry for him, almost, because he was lashing out from fear and from the sudden realization that the world wasn't what he thought it was. "Sit down, David," I said, not raising my voice but making it clear this wasn't a request, and something in my tone and my demeanor made him hesitate and then slowly sink back into his chair. "You do have contracts, and those contracts will be honored according to their terms, but let's be very clear about what's changed here. Every decision about this company's future now goes through me. Every strategy, every budget, every hire and fire, every single thing requires my approval. And if any of you have a problem with that, well, we can discuss the terms of your departure." The room was silent again, the reality sinking in, the comfortable world they'd known dissolving like sugar in water, leaving them uncertain, vulnerable, exposed. I looked around at these people who had treated me so poorly, who had dismissed my ideas and mocked my efforts and made me feel small and worthless. And I felt something complex, not pure satisfaction, not simple revenge, but something deeper, a sense of justice mixed with sadness that it had come to this, that they had been so blind and so cruel that this dramatic reversal was necessary. "I want to be clear about something," I continued, my voice softer now, more reflective. "I didn't do this just for revenge, didn't acquire this company just to humiliate you, although I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a small part of it. I did this because I saw potential that you couldn't see, because I understood opportunities you dismissed, because I built relationships and networks while you were too busy congratulating yourselves on your supposed superiority to notice what was happening around you." I paused, gathered my thoughts, feeling the weight of this moment. "You taught me something valuable, though you didn't mean to. You taught me that being underestimated can be an advantage, that invisibility can be freedom, that the people at the bottom often see things that people at the top miss because they're not blinded by their own assumptions and prejudices." Several executives looked genuinely shaken now, not just afraid for their jobs, but confronting something deeper, a recognition of their own behavior and what it revealed about them. The aftermath of that meeting rippled through Titan Industries like an earthquake, transforming relationships, power dynamics, and the entire culture of the organization in ways both expected and surprising. Some executives resigned immediately, unable to handle the reversal of fortune, unable to work for someone they had so thoroughly dismissed. their pride too wounded to continue. Richard Thornton was gone within a week, submitted his resignation with a terse letter that barely concealed his bitterness and anger, and honestly, I was relieved because I didn't think we could have built anything productive with that much resentment poisoning the well. Others surprisingly stayed and tried to adapt, tried to prove themselves under the new regime, and some of them actually succeeded, showed me dimensions of themselves I hadn't seen before, showed me that they could learn and grow and acknowledge their mistakes. Jennifer Morrison came to my office 3 days after the revelation, asked for a private meeting, and when the door closed, she did something I never expected. She apologized, genuinely with tears in her eyes, told me that my success had forced her to look at herself and her behavior, and she didn't like what she saw, asked if there was any way to make amends and earn my trust. I appreciated that, respected the courage it took to be that vulnerable, and while I couldn't forget the past, I gave her a chance to prove that her apology was more than words, gave her new responsibilities, and watched carefully to see if she would rise to them. She did, became one of my most valuable executives, and while we never became friends exactly, we developed a professional relationship built on mutual respect and her genuine effort to do better. The changes I implemented went far beyond personnel. I restructured how the company operated, broke down the silos that had created such a toxic hierarchy, empowered people at all levels to contribute ideas and take initiative, invested in the overlooked divisions and satellite offices that had been neglected, built systems that valued performance and creativity over politics and posturing. The satellite office where I had worked, that forgotten outpost that had been my base of operations, became a model for the new approach. I promoted several people from there into leadership roles, brought in new talent, turned it into an innovation hub that generated some of our best new ideas and most profitable initiatives. It wasn't easy. Change never is. There was resistance and confusion and mistakes along the way, but slowly, gradually, the culture shifted. People started to believe that merit actually mattered, that their voices would be heard, that success didn't require playing political games or sucking up to the right people. Performance improved dramatically, not just in terms of financial metrics, but in employee satisfaction, retention, innovation, all the things that matter for long-term success but are so often sacrificed for short-term gains. What I learned through all of this, the biggest lesson that emerged from this entire journey, is that respect cannot be demanded or inherited. It has to be earned through actions and consistency, and genuine regard for others. The executives who had treated me so poorly had confused their titles and positions with actual authority, had mistaken fear for respect, had never understood that real leadership comes from empowering others and creating value, not from putting people down and protecting your own status. I learned that being underestimated, while painful in the moment, can actually be a gift if you use it correctly, because people who don't see you as a threat will reveal themselves fully, will show you who they really are without the masks they wear around people they consider important. I learned that patience and strategic thinking can accomplish things that aggressive confrontation never could, that playing the long game and building carefully and deliberately can lead to outcomes that seem impossible when you're in the middle of the struggle. I learned that success is sweetest when it's built on genuine merit and hard work, rather than shortcuts or luck, that there's a special satisfaction in knowing you earned every bit of what you achieved through skill and determination, and refusing to quit even when everyone told you that you should. I learned that revenge, while it has its moments of satisfaction, is ultimately empty unless it's paired with something constructive, unless you use your new power to build something better rather than just tearing down those who wronged you. I learned that some people can change and grow when confronted with their mistakes, while others will cling to their resentment and bitterness no matter what, and you have to accept that you can't save everyone, can't force people to evolve if they're not willing. Most importantly, I learned that your value as a person is not determined by how others see you or treat you, but by who you know yourself to be, by the standards you set for yourself, by the work you're willing to do when nobody's watching and nobody's applauding. Those executives who dismissed me couldn't diminish my worth unless I let them, couldn't make me a failure unless I accepted their narrative, and the moment I decided that their opinion didn't define me, that their dismissal was their limitation, not mine, everything changed. I found freedom and power I didn't know I had, and that realization, that understanding of self-worth, independent of external validation, was perhaps the most valuable thing I gained from the entire experience. So here I am now, standing on the other side of this incredible journey, looking back at where I started and where I've arrived, and feeling such a complex mix of emotions that I struggle to name them all. There's satisfaction, obviously. There's pride in what I've accomplished. There's relief that the struggle is over and vindication that I was right about my own potential, even when everyone else was wrong. But there's also humility, because I know that circumstances played a role, that I had some luck along with the hard work, that there were moments when things could have gone differently and the whole venture could have collapsed. There's gratitude for the people who believed in me when others didn't, the investors who took a chance, the colleagues from the satellite office who supported me, the mentors and advisors who gave me guidance and encouragement when I needed it most. There's even strangely a kind of gratitude for the executives who dismissed me, because their treatment, while painful, forged me into someone stronger and more capable than I might have become if everything had been easy. Their obstacles became stepping stones. Their dismissal became motivation. Their blindness became my opportunity. I think about the person I was 3 years ago, walking into that satellite office for the first time, full of hope and naivety and completely unprepared for what was coming, and I barely recognize him now. He seems like a different person, someone younger and more fragile, someone who hadn't yet been tested by fire and emerged transformed. I think about all the moments of doubt and fear and pain, the nights I couldn't sleep, the times I wanted to quit, the instances of humiliation that burned so badly I thought I'd carry the scars forever. And I realize now that those moments were necessary, were part of the process of becoming someone capable of doing what I eventually did. I think about the responsibility I carry now, the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depend on the decisions I make, the investors who trusted me with their capital, the company itself and its place in the market, and its potential to create value or destroy it depending on how I lead. And that responsibility is both sobering and energizing, pushing me to be better every day, to make choices that serve not just my own ego, but the collective good. I think about where I'm going from here, what the next chapter holds, and honestly, I don't know exactly, because success at this level opens up new possibilities and new challenges that I'm still learning to navigate. But I know that whatever comes next, I'm ready for it, have been prepared by everything I've been through, have developed the skills and resilience and wisdom to handle whatever the world throws at me. And I want you to understand something crucial. You who are watching this right now, you who may be dealing with your own version of being dismissed or underestimated or treated like you don't matter, your story isn't over. Your potential isn't determined by how others see you or treat you, and the people who dismiss you today may be the ones looking up at you tomorrow if you refuse to accept their limited vision of who you are and what you're capable of. This isn't just a story about business or money or corporate politics. It's a story about human dignity and self-belief, and the power of refusing to be defined by others' limitations. It's about taking the pain and the obstacles and the unfair treatment and transforming them into fuel for something extraordinary. It's about proving not to others but to yourself that you are more than they thought, more than you sometimes think, capable of things that seem impossible until suddenly they're not. Have you ever been dismissed or underestimated in your life? Have you ever been in a situation where people treated you like you didn't matter, where your contributions were ignored, where your potential was overlooked? I need you to comment below right now and share your experience, because these stories matter, because knowing we're not alone in facing these challenges makes them more bearable, because your story might inspire someone else who's struggling right now and wondering if they should keep going. I want you to understand something really important, something that took me years to fully grasp. The content of this story, the lessons embedded in this journey, they're not just entertainment. They're not just a dramatic tale to pass the time. They're a roadmap for navigating some of the hardest challenges you'll face in your professional and personal life. They're insights earned through real struggle and real pain that could save you years of suffering if you internalize them and apply them to your own circumstances. The importance of understanding this content cannot be overstated, because we all face moments when we're underestimated, when we're dismissed, when people make us feel small, and how we respond to those moments, whether we let them break us or use them to build something stronger, that determines the trajectory of our entire lives. If this story touched your heart, if something in this journey resonated with you, if you felt even a fraction of the emotions I experienced, then I need you to leave a like on this video right now. Hit that thumbs up button, because it helps this content reach more people who need to hear it. More people who are struggling with being dismissed and need to know that they can overcome it. More people who need hope and inspiration and practical wisdom for dealing with difficult professional situations. And I need you to do something else, something really important. I need you to subscribe to my Truth Revealed Tales right now. Hit that subscribe button, because we share stories like this regularly, real experiences and emotional journeys that teach important lessons about resilience and success and overcoming obstacles. Stories that will inspire you and challenge you and give you tools for navigating your own challenges. This is just one story among many, one journey among countless others. And if this one moved you, there are so many more waiting that will do the same, that will show you different aspects of the human experience, different ways people have overcome adversity and achieved things that seemed impossible. And don't forget to click that notification bell. Turn on all notifications because you don't want to miss a single story. Don't want to miss the next powerful journey that could change your perspective or give you exactly the insight you need at exactly the right moment. The community we're building here at My Truth Revealed Tales is special. It's a place where we share real stories with real emotions and real lessons, where we support each other through our struggles and celebrate our victories, where we refuse to let the world make us feel small or unworthy, where we claim our power and our dignity, and our right to pursue extraordinary things, regardless of what others think or say. You're part of this community now, part of this movement of people who believe in the power of stories to transform lives and inspire change. And I need you to stay engaged, stay connected, keep coming back for more content that will push you to be better and dream bigger, and refuse to accept limitations that others try to impose. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, you are capable of so much more than you know, capable of things that will shock and amaze the people who underestimated you, capable of transforming pain into power and obstacles into opportunities. And I can't wait to hear about your victories, about the moment when you prove everyone wrong and show them what you're really made of. So go out there and make it happen. Make your own incredible story and then come back and share it with us, because we want to celebrate with you and be inspired by you and continue building this community of people who refuse to be dismissed or diminished or defined by anyone else's limited vision of what's possible.